Jon Snow came to life in Game of Thrones because of Kit Harrington. He nailed the part and did so because he picked Snow's most important traits straight from George R.R. Martin's books. Now, there are rumors of a Game of Thrones sequel, while House of the Dragon is providing plenty of entertainment. Join us as we see which traits Jon Snow and other actors chose to make their characters perfect. First up, Snow's moodiness. Snow's arc in the final Game of Thrones season wasn't popular with viewers, but the character remains iconic as far as good television goes. That's because Harrington brought so much to Jon Snow, and he took the inspiration straight from the books. There is a whole bunch of fun and exciting characters throughout the Game of Thrones story, but Harrington never got the opportunity to bring any of that fun to Jon Snow. Jon is broody, and it seems like he's always in a bad mood. Tyrion even comments on his broodiness in one of the episodes. In the books, Snow is described as extremely sullen. His sense of humor is dry in the books. We didn't see much of that in the show, but he doesn't smile often and struggles to find positivity in any given situation. His swordplay is also straight from the books. Sure, some characters are more powerful than him with a sword in hand, but he proves himself as one of Westeros's best. Harrington does exceptionally well in the battle sequences, and he manages to show off Snow's fighting prowess, something that makes him come across even more heroic. Jon doesn't see as many battles in the book as he does in the show, but despite his age, he is still reckoned as one of the best fighters in the Night's Watch. His comrades don't stand a chance during practice, and he keeps on showing speed and agility in battle situations. To see how Harrington mimics the books, Jon Snow, with family relations, keep watching. Next, Harrington also uses the book's description of Snow's guarded nature. This is where the actor and character meet. Harrington, like Jon Snow, is a guarded young man. In the show, whether he spends time at Winterfell or with his brothers at Castle Black, Harrington gives Jon Snow a heroic mix of stoicism and a withdrawn, lonely nature. While Tyrion accompanies others to the wall in the books, he mentions how guarded he finds Jon. Granted, anyone may seem guarded when compared to Tyrion, but let's not forget that he is a superb judge of character and always seems sympathetic to the young man who seems so lonely. Harrington also leaned heavily on the books when portraying Snow as an outsider. The Starks are only together for the first few episodes of the series. Even then, Jon seems like an outsider. In the family scenes at Winterfell, Harrington brings a sense of shame and discomfort to Jon Snow. Jon's character in the novel is a great source for this trait Harrington exploited when he interpreted the role, and it is also responsible, at least in part, for much of the journey of Snow's character. After being told he cannot attend a feast, when the king visits Winterfell, he even tries to crash the event in a drunken state. And then there's his closeness to Arya and Robb. Jon Snow doesn't feel like a real Stark, but he is extremely close to some of his Stark siblings. He gets along well with Robb and sees Arya as his real little sister, maybe because she doesn't truly fit into the family either. In the books, these connections are also strong. Jon is considered a closer sibling to Arya than any of her other true-born siblings, and Robb considers Jon as his heir before he dies, as evidence of how much trust he places in his half-brother. The one thing that makes Jon feel as if he belongs somewhere is the Night's Watch. After joining, things don't start smoothly, but soon his comrades become familiar to him, and this is played with great sensitivity and foresight by Harrington. In the books, Snow finds both acceptance and purpose with the Night's Watch too. Stannis, you will remember, offers to make Jon a real Stark. He even offers him Winterfell, but Jon chooses the Night's Watch. He no longer feels defined by his position in the Stark family. Coming up, Harrington makes magic when he interprets Snow's leadership abilities. Stay with us. Harrington also gets Snow's connection to the wildlings down pat. Jon's connection to the wildlings always complicated his position within the Night's Watch. During the first Game of Thrones season, the wildlings are considered Jon's worst enemies. Once he starts living with them though, he gets their complexity. The on-screen chemistry between Jon and Ygritte and Jon and Torment isn't in the books, but he still shares the connection. It is in the way he makes an effort to settle them in New Westeros lives, and also the way he respects Mance Rayder, their leader. When the books begin, Jon Snow is a mere teenager. This is one of the starkest differences between the books and the show. In the books, he sometimes comes across as whiny and certainly immature. At that point, he sacrifices a bit of his heroism, like we see in the show, for being more relatable, like he is in the books. In the show, we meet him when he is older. Harrington captures a blend of the book and show perfectly. He portrays Snow as a youngster who is easily insulted and complains when he doesn't get his own way. In fact, when the Castle Black assignment comes, Jon Snow acts more like a teenager than a warrior. Harrington also does fine work with Snow's leadership abilities. While the character probably loses some of its nice guy appeal as the show progresses, Jon Snow does become a better leader. He's more responsible, makes mistakes, learns, and repeats. In the episode called Watchers on the Wall, Harrington portrays Snow in a way that makes it easy to understand why people would follow Jon Snow into battle. In the books, Jon Snow is also shown as he puts the more youthful aspects of his personality aside, so he can fully step into the shoes of a leader of the Night's Watch. Harrington makes it clear early on in the role that Snow is someone who can face dangerous situations and make hard decisions, and this is something that comes through in the books too. In many ways, Jon Snow is a tragic character. This is especially true with the way the story comes to an end. His duty comes first, and at this altar, he frequently sacrifices the things he cares most about. The choice he makes to kill Daenerys to save Westeros in the finale is a great example of this. The books haven't reached that point for Jon Snow yet, but it is a characteristic he struggles with, and that continues to cost him dearly. From remaining with the Night's Watch when Ned Stark is killed, to losing Ygritte in the Wildling battle, Jon sees that duty often means the death of love. But Harrington is not the only actor that leans heavily on the books. Emilia Clarke does too. Keep watching. More about that in a moment. But Harrington is not the only actor who leaned on the books for character inspiration. Emilia Clarke also did the most magnificent job of blowing breath into Daenerys Targaryen, and she got many of the most significant mannerisms and traits from the books. House of the Dragon is the Targaryen story, and it shows the dynasty at the pinnacle of its power. While it is being spectacularly received, this show owes much of its success to the 5-time Emmy nominee and her interpretation of Daenerys Targaryen. In season 1 of Game of Thrones, Daenerys is almost naive. Her life was spent with the physically and emotionally abusive Viserys, and as a consequence, she has no idea how human interactions should look. Life among Drogo's Khalasar is taxing and challenging, and it makes her more vulnerable than she'd ever been before. Emilia brings Dany's innocence to life with spectacular balance. Virtue is difficult to portray at the best of times, and Clarke wisely decided not to overdo it. Daenerys doesn't remain innocent for long, and Clarke also does a magnificent job of portraying the transition. Clarke makes Daenerys' gift for languages comfortable to watch. Both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon has plenty of Valyrian phrases and words. In the world of ice and fire, other languages are spoken too. There's Old Gishari and Dothraki. Old Gishari doesn't feature in the show though. In both the book and the show, Daenerys' gift for languages comes to the fore. She's fluent in the Common Tongue and Valyrian, and learns Dothraki in a flash. This makes Emilia Clarke one of the most finessed actors in the series. Whenever she has to recite one of Daenerys' soliloquies, Clarke is perfect. Just think about her final speech to her armies after King's Landing has been burned to the ground. To see how similar the book and show are to one of Dany's most prominent characteristics, watch until the end. Also, Emilia is fantastic, with Daenerys' more inspiring qualities. Daenerys' greatest gift may just be her ability to inspire devotion in her followers. The most heroic Targaryen kings, Jaehaerys, Daeron, Aegon, were all notorious for how much their subjects loved and respected them. Dany also won the hearts of her subjects through all her journeys, and she managed to secure an army that would follow her to the gates of hell. While she brings that to Daenerys' character, Clarke also perfectly interprets the proud and regal spirit Dany has in the books. This is a great example of how the books and show work together in the hands of a skilled actor. And finally, how Clark makes Daenerys' hatred of slavery sparkle. From the beginning of Game of Thrones, it is clear Daenerys abhors slavery. Perhaps more than anything else, she amasses power, and one of the first acts she performs is to free slaves and abolish slavery wherever she finds it. Her wars of conquest show her to be a decisive leader, and she isn't afraid to be merciless against anyone unworthy and evil in her books. Dany's desire for justice is perfectly portrayed by Clark, and this comes straight from the books too. She is willing to get justice by any available means, and manages to do this without betraying herself in the process. Dany's wars of conquest display her as a decisive leader who isn't afraid to be merciless against those she considers unworthy and evil. Clark embodies Dany's desire for justice and willingness to get it by any means necessary, centered around the character's opposition to such a reprehensible practice. And that, folks, is a glance into the way the actors fused the main characters in the books and shows together. Remember, hit follow, like, and subscribe, and keep your eyes peeled for our next contribution.